Section 2 of the Life of Samuel Johnson. Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Life of Samuel Johnson, Volume 1, by James Boswell. Section 2. To write the life of him who excelled all mankind in writing the lives of others, and who, whether we consider his extraordinary endowments or his various works, has been equalled by few in any age, is an arduous, and may be reckoned, in me, a presumptuous task. Had Dr. Johnson written his own life in conformity with the opinion which he has given, that every man's life may be best written by himself, had he employed in the preservation of his own history that clearness of narration and elegance of language in which he has embalmed so many eminent persons, the world would probably have had the most perfect example of biography that ever was exhibited. But although he, at different times, in a desultory manner, committed to writing many particulars of the progress of his mind and fortunes, he never had persevering diligence enough to form them into regular composition. Of these memorials a few have been preserved, but the greater part was consigned by him to the flames a few days before his death. As I had the honour and happiness of enjoying his friendship for upwards of 20 years, as I had the scheme of writing his life constantly in view, as he was well apprised of these circumstances, and from time to time obligingly satisfied my inquiries by communicating to me the incidents of his early years, as I acquired a facility in recollecting, and was very assiduous in recording his conversation, of which the extraordinary vigour and vivacity constituted one of the first features of his character, and as I have spared no pains in obtaining materials concerning him from every quarter where I could discover that they were to be found, and have been favoured with the most liberal communications by his friends, I flatter myself that few biographers have entered upon such a work as this with more advantages, independent of literary abilities, in which I am not vain enough to compare myself with some great names who have gone before me in this kind of writing. Since my work was announced, several lives and memoirs of Dr. Johnson have been published, the most voluminous of which is one compiled for the booksellers of London by Sir John Hawkins, Knight, a man whom, during my long intimacy with Dr. Johnson, I never saw in his company, I think, but once, and I am sure not above twice. Note: the greater part of this book was written while Sir John Hawkins was alive, and I avow that one object of my strictures was to make him feel some compunction for his illiberal treatment of Dr. Johnson. Since his decease, I have suppressed several of my remarks upon his work, but though I would not war with the dead offensively, I think it necessary to be strenuous in defence of my illustrious friend, which I cannot be without strong animadversions upon a writer who has greatly injured him. Let me add, that though I doubt I should not have been very prompt to gratify Sir John Hawkins with any compliment in his lifetime, I do now frankly acknowledge that in my opinion his volume, however inadequate and improper as a life of Dr. Johnson, and however discredited by unpardonable inaccuracies in other respects, contains a collection of curious anecdotes and observations, which few men but its author could have brought together. End of note. Johnson might have esteemed him for his decent religious demeanour and his knowledge of books and literary history, but from the rigid formality of his manners it is evident that they never could have lived together with companionable ease and familiarity. Nor had Sir John Hawkins that nice perception which was necessary to mark the finer and less obvious parts of Johnson's character. His being appointed one of his executors gave him an opportunity of taking possession of such fragments of a diary and other papers as were left, of which, before delivering them up to the residuary legatee, whose property they were, he endeavoured to extract the substance. In this he has not been very successful, as I have found upon a perusal of those papers, which have been since transferred to me. Sir John Hawkins's ponderous labours, I must acknowledge, exhibit a farrago of which a considerable portion is not devoid of entertainment to the lovers of literary gossiping. But beside its being swelled out with long, unnecessary extracts from various works, even one of several leaves from Osborne's Harleian Catalogue, and those not compiled by Johnson, but by Aldis, a very small part of it relates to the person who is the subject of the book, and in that there is such an inaccuracy in the statement of facts as in so solemn an author is hardly excusable, and certainly makes his narrative very unsatisfactory. But what is still worse, there is throughout the whole of it a dark, uncharitable cast, by which the most unfavourable construction is put upon almost every circumstance in the character and conduct of my illustrious friend, who, I trust, will by a true and fair delineation be vindicated both from the injurious misrepresentations of this author and from the slighter aspersions of a lady who once lived in great intimacy with him. There is in the British Museum a letter from Bishop Warburton to Dr. Birch on the subject of biography, which, though I am aware it may expose me to a charge of artfully raising the value of my own work by contrasting it with that of which I have spoken, is so well conceived and expressed that I cannot refrain from here inserting it. I shall endeavour, says Dr. Warburton, to give you what satisfaction I can in anything you want to be satisfied in any subject of Milton, and am extremely glad you intend to write his life. Almost all the life writers we have had before Toland and Desmaiseaux are indeed strange, insipid creatures, and yet I had rather read the worst of them than be obliged to go through with this of Milton's or the other's life of Boileau, where there is such dull, heavy succession of long quotations of disinteresting passages that it makes their method quite nauseous. But the verbose, tasteless Frenchman seems to lay it down as a principle that every life must be a book, and what's worse, it proves a book without a life. For what do we know of Boileau after all his tedious stuff? You are the only one, and I speak it without a compliment, that by the vigour of your style and sentiments, and the real importance of your materials, have the art, which one could imagine no one could have missed, of adding agreements to the most agreeable subject in the world, which is literary history. November the 24th, 1737. Instead of melting down my materials into one mass, and constantly speaking in my own person, by which I might have appeared to have more merit in the execution of the work, I have resolved to adopt and enlarge upon the excellent plan of Mr. Mason in his Memoirs of Gray. Wherever narrative is necessary to explain, connect, and supply, I furnish it to the best of my abilities. But in the chronological series of Johnson's life, which I trace as distinctly as I can year by year, I produce, wherever it is in my power, his own minutes, letters, or conversation, being convinced that this mode is more lively, and will make my readers better acquainted with him, than even most of those were who actually knew him, but can know him only partially, whereas there is here an accumulation of intelligence from various points, by which his character is more fully understood and illustrated. Indeed, I cannot conceive a more perfect mode of writing any man's life, than not only relating all the most important events of it in their order, but interweaving what he privately wrote and said and thought, by which mankind are enabled, as it were, to see him live, and to live o'er each scene with him, as he actually advanced through the several stages of his life. Had his other friends been as diligent, and ardent as I was, he might have been almost entirely preserved.